Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao, and today we're going on a little bit of a different road. I'm actually speaking to someone who I've worked with for many years. I hired her as a PR agency when I was asked to do a whitening session on Fox News Live in studio. It was probably one of the scariest things I've had to do. I look back now and I look ridiculous on camera. As people who listen to this podcast know, I've never been, I always admit I'm great talking to people, but you stick a camera in front of me, I have a hard time saying my words. I've done this work with Mindi a number of times. Today we're going to be talking about how to fire start your brand. She is a public relations person. I've worked with her personally. I wanted to have her on here to talk about things like what is the difference between PR and advertising, how dentists can become a local celebrity and leader in their markets, why hiring a PR person versus doing it yourself, why you have to decide on which one, and then things like how to find a story idea, how to pitch, and whom to pitch. So I want to welcome a good friend of mine, Mindi Barnett, to the Raving Patients Podcast.
Thanks for having me. And I have to ask you, Dr. Tao, you think being on Fox TV was more scary than doing a root canal?
Yeah. Hey, you know what? When you put a camera in front of my face, and that's a lie. That was we did a lot of pieces that were never live.
You got thrown right to the wolves. Yes, I'm just teasing you.
Yeah, usually they're recorded, and we do multiple takes. But first time live, I mean, it is not easy, and I give a lot of credit to the people who do it all the time, because it is a totally different atmosphere when you do things like that. But I don't even remember if I had to guess, that was probably like 2012. I'd have to look back at YouTube and see when the video was uploaded.
I forget. I think it may have been. I know my son is going to be 10. And I was either like pregnant with him, or he just was born. It's something around
maybe
that
11,
time.
11 years old or something.
Yeah.
So that's how we got started. So why don't you, for the listeners here and viewers, because it's obviously being shown on YouTube, why don't you kind of tell them what you do, how you help dentists, a little bit about your background, so they have a little bit of understanding about how you help them.
Okay, no problem. So I actually went to school for broadcast journalism. I was lucky enough to break into the industry soon after graduating from Hofstra University in Long Island. And I worked in TV news for 10 years. I was a news anchor reporter. I worked in Philadelphia. I worked in New York. I worked in Louisiana, and I worked in Illinois, and kind of did everything under the sun. But my sweet spot was always medical stories. I loved, at one point in my career, I was actually a medical reporter in addition to anchoring, because it was my beat, quote unquote. And I always had an interest in it. I found it really compelling. I really felt like I was sharing really good information to viewers and helping better their lives in some way, as opposed to just simply reporting about a shooting or something like that. Then I segued into public relations, but with a focus on media strategy, specifically using my journalism background to help business owners and medical leaders like yourself propel and position them as thought leaders in their industry via the news, and using the media as the messenger, so to speak. So I would look for story ideas that were trending, maybe something that's cutting edge, or they had a compelling patient or something of that nature, and would pitch it. So I've now had my firm for almost 20 years. And so now I can say I've been on PR much, much longer than I've been in television. But I do believe that having that foundation really helped me be a very good public relations professional. I have a team of 5. We have a presence in the Philadelphia market as well as New York City, but represent leaders in the medical industry and other industries as well, all over the United States, work with all of the local media markets, and also work with the national folks like the Today Show, Good Morning America, the Wall Street Journal, you name it. In addition to running that PR firm, and I'm very much in the weeds, as we say. In fact, I had a shoot today, and I was there running around like a crazy person, making sure everything went well. I also have been lucky enough to attain a publisher. I've written 2 books that are more motivational, women empowerment, business skewed. One came out in 2019. It's called Intermission: How Fervor, Friendships, and Faith Took Me to the Second Act. The other one came out October 26th, and that one is entitled You Don't Need to Be a Bitch to Be a Boss. And that's all about being a good mentor, being a good mentee, leading with kindness, but also the difference between being a pushover, basically, and also somebody who is just not necessarily a witch with a bee. And I am doing a lot of keynoting. I've used my writing for that platform. So sometimes I speak specifically about PR and how you can do it yourself in a way. I launched a series called Fire Starters, which basically helps people have the tools and the knowledge to do public relations on their own if they don't have the bandwidth or the budget to hire a firm like MB and Associates. And, I just really enjoy helping people and that sort of thing. I'm a mom. I have 2 children, and I reside in New Jersey and in New York. And I'm going back to graduate school to seek my master's in psychology to be able to use that in the speaking space. So that's my background in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And you also, I've connected you with a couple people in the dental industry. You worked with my friend Tim in Chicago area.
Dr. Sterneman.
Algonquin. And you also work with my friend in Oakland, Michigan. Amanda Sheehan.
Yep, Sheehan. Yep. And then Dr. Maria Mallon in Wilson,
correct.
Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
He's been amazing. And they're all doing very well and becoming little local celebrities in their media markets. Dr. Mallon was just on Inside Edition not that long ago, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we did a story on how the pandemic is creating a lot of issues with your teeth because people are grinding their teeth so much because they're so stressed out, which is a good story idea, everybody listening, when we get later on into how to do it.
I think
it's still trending.
I think a great pitch story is how the pandemic turned everything into virtual and everybody's seeing their faces like we're seeing here.
Oh, we've been doing that too, the Zoom. And that's Zoom, the next thing. Yeah. People running to get Invisalign because they want to straighten their teeth. They want to get their teeth whitened. And then also some of the craziness that's going on in the world of TikTok with people using the latest crazes, like using magic erasers to whiten your teeth, and the dangers. We're pitching that, the dangers of that. And also they're filing their teeth with a nail file. And that's a horrible idea too. Remember you and I did that story on the diamonds in the teeth because Kanye West had that, and then you were talking about
the grills,
the grill.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was on the news for that. I was on the news when the dentist had the needle issues and there was an HIV and Hep B problem. I got on the news for that. I was on the news like 8 or 10 times. I mean, it was wonderful. The problem was I shifted my career, as you know, to doing other things outside of dentistry.
Yeah, and you're doing so great. You're helping so many dentists out there.
So
using your experience.
It was a little bit of a different focus there. So let's now jump into for those listeners and people watching, what is the difference between public relations and advertising? Just like there's also, I talk about a difference when I speak about marketing and advertising. They're 2 totally different things. Mm-hmm. So why don't you give the listeners and viewers a little bit of things about the difference between what public relations is and advertising?
Okay, sure. So the main thing is the fact that advertising is a paid opportunity. You're paying to be in a magazine. You're paying to be in TV, whether it be a commercial or an integrated segment or something of that nature. And public relations is earned media. Now, PR has a lot of different facets. So there's event planning and other things that go along with it. I'm speaking specifically about my specialty, which is the media strategy. So it's in addition to the fact that it's earned media and it's, quote, free, you're not paying for it, it's all editorial, it's also much more credible than advertising in a sense where there's the media is obviously one, if not the most credible forces of nature that people rely on for information and news you can use. They're the messenger. They're positioning you as the thought leader to speak about that crazy grill story that we were just talking about, or why you shouldn't use a magic eraser to whiten your teeth. Perhaps you might behoove yourself to go to the dentist and get Zoom or something of that nature. In addition, it organically builds your SEO because it's obviously going to be positioned online, whether it be a print opportunity or on television or radio. It's always positioned online too. It gives you instant, content for social media that is extremely credible. And I can't keep driving home enough the fact that it's free. And also the fact that the opportunities are going to be more vast, if you will, in the sense where you're doing a TV segment that might be 2.5, 3 minutes if you're lucky. 3 minutes if you're lucky. Typically, they're about 2.5, 1 minute and a half, give or take, for a segment. If you're paying for that placement, it might, and especially on the 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock news, depending on where you're, residing, it could cost you an upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 for all of that airtime, because airtime is specifically usually 10-second, 20-second spots, give or take, and that's quite expensive. So you get much more, exposure. You have much more, opportunities to be seen in a variety of different places. So that's like the main differences between the two. Advertising really it serves its purpose. I personally believe that professionals should not advertise, because if you're good at what you do, the rule of thumb is that people are going to know who you are and go to you. But obviously we can't rely on that. That's not realistic. So people do advertise, and there's a time and a place for it. If you're doing a promotion, or you're having a sale, or you're opening up another office or something like that, then you do want to do some advertising, I would say. But overall, it's much more credible to go in the public relations lane, so to speak.
One thing I wanted to ask you as we're talking about this, there are, we're going to talk about why they should hire someone like yourself versus doing it themselves. But one of the things I did, even with you, I knew the power of press releases. So there are websites like prweb.com and prlog.org and all these other sites that you can put out a press release on almost anything you want that you think is newsworthy. And I mean, it's amazing how many things pick it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of pickups that way. I don't do it I obviously go about it slightly differently.
Well, of course.
Because I'm pitching directly to people.
Right.
And they're all unique pitches, and they're customized for the outlets and things like that. But yes, there's like PR Newswire. There's a lot of different sources, and it's a little bit more generic, but you do get the SEO, and you do get pickups, and sometimes you get lucky, and not only do they get picked up in a digital space, you might get picked up and they might run in a print space too. So that is something to keep in mind, and it's very inexpensive overall to put a press release out there. Obviously you have to take the time to write the press release in a compelling way, but after that, it's usually between $400 and $600, give or take, to get that out there. So it's not that bad. It's just, not customized, and it's the same. They basically run the press release. But absolutely, I agree with you. Correct.
So, as we told the viewers and listeners, we worked together. I was looking at my YouTube channel because all the videos on there. It's probably 8 or 9 times I was on some news network about some topic. And that whitening segment was on YouTube July of 2011. So I have that date when it was uploaded. So it's 10 years ago now.
That makes sense. That's when my son was born.
Yeah, so 10 years ago we first worked together.
Yeah.
So, and for a time being there, not that I'm very modest. I don't look at myself this way. I look at myself as a regular person. But as a time being there, people would stop me on the street and say, "You look familiar." I'm like, "Were you on the news recently?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" I'd never believed when someone actually said that. But, you find the right person to do this for you, you can become somewhat of a local celebrity and a leader in the market because you are on the news, and again, it's a credible thing. Being on the news is credible. So,
yes.
Why don't you talk about how dentists? Obviously, they hire someone like yourself. You're doing the pitching for them, but can you talk about the process someone would go through to become a local celebrity, local leader, and you have vast credibility then at that point?
Sure. I think the first thing that your listeners need to keep in mind is that because it's editorial, and as I keep saying, free, you need to offer news you can use. You need to offer them actual information, and you cannot, I can't stress this enough because it's the first turnoff of a reporter, you cannot make it a commercial for your practice. You're being positioned as the thought leader. They're going to likely, if it's an in-office shoot, show your practice. They're certainly going to plug your practice because that's where you're working. And people watching or listening or reading about you are going to see you as the expert that you are. And whether you're already your patients, it's going to reinforce to them that you're in the right spot, or when and if they're in the market for a dentist, they're going to remember your name because you're going to become a household name. But when you're coming up with a story idea, you need to kind of figure out what's going on. What are you seeing in your office that is a trend, right? So I would imagine most people are seeing all of a sudden, we were shut down, the world, people for whatever reason, they weren't going to the dentist as often as they were before the COVID pandemic hit, because unfortunately some novices think going to the dentist is not necessarily always a necessity, but we all know it is, so perhaps they put off their cleaning. Now they have a mouthful of cavities, and maybe you would have caught the cavity earlier on, but it manifested into something worse because they waited to come in. So that might be a trend that you're seeing, and therefore that would be a compelling pitch. The story that I mentioned earlier with the teeth grinding is still something that's trending. If you're seeing that in your practice, maybe you have a really compelling case, someone that came in and has like a very unique backstory about, the patient, and they're willing to share their story publicly in an effort to help others out there to avoid maybe mistakes that they made. Maybe you're doing a donation. Maybe you found somebody that needs a new smile, or you want to do that to raise awareness. You did, I believe, Dr. Tao, dentistry from the heart, if I'm not mistaken. And that's an amazing, anybody listening that does that, that's a really good way to get publicity. I mean, obviously you're doing it to give back, and that's incredible, but why not let the community know that? Because obviously people, it pulls at their heartstrings, and you'd be positioned as someone who actually cares about the people living in your community. You're not just looking out to grow your own businesses. So the main thing is to figure out what's a compelling story idea. And once you have that, share that information as the leader that you are with a member of the media, and know who you're pitching. So watch the news, read the papers, read the magazines. If you watch your local ABC station, for instance, and there's a health reporter or someone that maybe it's a smaller market and they don't have one person specifically designated to cover health, whoever's covering more of the lifestyle type stories or something like that, reach out to them, research their information. It does take a little bit of digging, but I mean, I am as a professional subscribed to an expensive service to have that information at my fingertips, but it's not like the best kept secret. You would go online, look at the station's website, find out who the reporter is. You can certainly send them an email, and then just make it very short and sweet, explain why the story is unique. Offer them whatever you can offer them visually. Maybe you have a patient that would be willing to get profiled, or perhaps you can offer X, Y, or Z so that their viewers can have information, and then follow up with them. And don't be shy about following up with them, because reporters get hundreds and hundreds of emails and research, like outreach, pretty much every single day. So you need to be kind of the squeaky wheel. And I always say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So obviously follow up. At the end of the day, my biggest take home is not to make it a commercial, and to make it actually like news you can use, because it will really, really attract their attention, and you will indeed be positioned as a thought leader, and they'll be like, oh, they get it. They know what we need. And then they'll go to you for stories too. It'll be like a two-way street eventually.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we also did a piece on, I did backpacks, and I gave them to the community. If you remember.
That's right. Yeah.
And that guy, and I don't know if you remember, but that got there was an emergency somewhere on the news, and they had to cut my segment short because they had a breaking news segment.
Yeah, there's breaking news.
So that, I mean, look, it's news, so you never know. But that was also live.
That happens.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. But that was what happened there. So I think we did.
But that was a good story, and that was something you were going to do anyway. And I was like, oh, let's write a media alert. We'll get some media about it.
And we did Halloween. And we did a Halloween giveaway, candy giveaway. That was on early morning with she retired, I think. Who's Yuki Washington and
CBS 3. Yeah.
Yuki, whoever the woman was there, I can't remember her name.
I forget.
And then the main person who interviewed me a lot was Joyce Evans, and she retired too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Joyce was a good friend of yours, so that was a nice
from
place
Philadelphia,
to get.
Fox 29.
Yep.
Yeah.
So now that we discussed, why dentists should do this, let's talk about it, because obviously there's a fee, and you cost money, and you should, because of what you get. And my ROI was tremendous for when I did it. Let's talk about why hire someone like yourself versus someone who's listening and say, well, I can do some of these things myself and get it. So why hire you versus trying it themselves?
Okay, well, first of all, yes, that's absolutely true. Anybody can do it. for the most part. I mean, myself, I have that news background, so I'm a little bit unique. I actually think I'm unique in terms of other PR people because of the fact that I came from news. Just today, without getting into too many details, I was working in tandem with another publicist who represented a hotel that my client has a presence in. We did a big piece in New York City with Pix 11, and the other publicist, while she was lovely, like, didn't get it, like, visually, like, what this reporter needed. And the reporter kind of pulled me aside. She's like, she doesn't get it. I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm sorry. My parts were really strong and her parts were not. So, it's not to say, I mean, I think because I worked in news, I also spent time in print, I sort of understand, because I come from that side of the spectrum. And it, like I said earlier, it really just helps me personally do my job that much better. But that said, it's a full-time job, Dr. Tao, like literally a full-time job. So, if you're of a small office and you just started out, or, you're just looking to get a little bit out there, but like in PR, then it's, it's a massage effect. You want to not just do one placement and wait 6 months and do another placement. It's something that you kind of want to always have a presence every month in the media in some shape or form. And that's sort of what our campaigns look like for the most part. But it's just a matter of having the time in the day to do the follow-ups and to research and send the pitch and write it up and call and follow up and call and follow up and call and follow up. And then when they want to do the story, being able to put it all together and make it strong. So it's helpful to have, obviously, a publicist to be working on your behalf. But again, you can do it yourself. I offer courses and I offer people the tools and the tips to be able to market a little bit themselves. I actually help them with pitch writing and things like that, so they have an idea of how to go about it, because it's a little bit of an art. It's sort of like writing a mini news story that I went to school for. I mean, it's certainly not something that, it's a different style of writing. Certainly, it's not impossible. It's a learned skill that anybody can pick up. It's, again, just having the time to be able to do that.
Yeah, I thought it was a great investment because I certainly was too busy running a practice, too busy doing all the other things. I was just starting out. Obviously, when we first met, I can't see someone doing it themselves. They can certainly try, but I think the time they're going to spend is going to cost them a lot of money and just time.
Right. I mean, your time might be more valuable doing Invisalign on a patient versus like looking up story ideas or whatever. Plus, also having the connections and stuff helps too. I mean, there are markets I don't have as strong of a footprint, if you will, that I do in some others. But I, like I mentioned earlier, had that extensive database and the ability to, kind of like, and I know a lot of people who know a lot of people at this point because they've been in the business so long. But I don't want to discourage your listeners, though. They can definitely do it, especially smaller markets. Like if someone's listening, for instance, in like Omaha, Nebraska, the news in those cities isn't like as busy as it is in, I mean, watch me jinx myself. There's like some major catastrophe, God forbid. No, but like, it's not like being in Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? And so, they're looking for more, like, I guess, like health related, more evergreen stories. They're not covering, God forbid, all these shootings and like, things like that. So it really depends on where you're located too.
Yeah, and
geographically.
And one thing I noticed was that when we did a piece in a city, other news agencies picked it up. Now, it's not going to really help the dentist all that much because they're not in that city, but that's what happens too. They reuse the material on other news stations as well.
They say it gets put on the feed, if you will, and so they can pick it up if it's a story that's trending, or that's in the TV space. And sometimes papers are owned by big companies. Like Gannett is obviously a huge paper, and like in the Philly area, there's a few papers that we work with on a regular basis, and often the stories get put in the Gannett feed, and then they get run in like, I don't know, like San Jose or different markets like that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely cool. So let's talk about, they're listening to you. They say, oh, this is really cool. I want to consider hiring you or doing it myself or doing it themselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do you find stories that may be interesting to the news? Because obviously everything's not going to be interesting. Obviously certain things, as you mentioned, are trending and are more powerful stories at some points. Obviously social media is very powerful right now. You mentioned TikTok is huge right now. I don't know if you saw the story about the woman who had a lot of dental work done. She had all her teeth extracted and had implants placed. And she's a very attractive woman, but she showed herself literally taking her eyebrows off, removing her teeth, and she said, "I lost all my teeth," and she showed this video.
Why did she do that? Did she say?
I guess she wanted to just show people what it's.
No, I mean, why did she take out her teeth? Did she?
Oh, that's what it was about. No, she had no teeth. She had all implants placed, and she was I think she was on drugs and lost her teeth, and she had upper and lower implant dentures made. But she was saying not all is what you seem. Where she was very put together. She had fake eyelashes, fake this, and she took them all apart. And
that's kind of cool.
So you should look it up. I'll email it to you and show you the video because it's pretty cool. But these things on TikTok obviously get viral very quickly. So how do you find certain stories to obviously pitch to the dentist first to make sure there's something they can talk about, and then obviously pitch to the news agencies?
That's a good question. So I read everything, literally. Like, I subscribe to a variety of newspapers. I have a lot of different clients, so I have to be abreast of a lot of different industries. So just, knowing what's going on, and not just what's going on in your own practice, but knowing what's going on in other practices. Like, you may not be seeing this on one trend, but maybe it's trending in, say, Boston, and you might be able to comment on that because perhaps it's going to be coming to you, or maybe you haven't personally seen it, but other offices in your market have, and so you can still comment as an expert in the dental space, certainly. Being abreast of what is going on entertainment shows, what celebrities are doing. Like, everybody wants to kind of do that. Like, I rep for a totally different industry, but I represent a therapist, right? And so we're doing a story on going back to your exes, and we're tying it in with Jennifer and Ben, going back together. And that's apparently a very popular trend right now after the pandemic. A lot of people are going backwards and revisiting old relationships for a sense of comfort and things like that. So anyway, you could do something similar in the dental space certainly as well. I can't think of a celebrity tie-in right now with teeth, but there's always, like we talked about Kanye West, like there's always something like that. Or at one point, remember The Gap? We did that piece on The Gap, how Michael Strahan had The Gap. And in fact, last spring on April Fool's Day, he closed the gap. And I actually pitched that for Dr. Mallon, and like it got her in TMZ commenting about how whatever and stuff, how that you can do that too, and what he likely may have done. She speculated, and we thought it was veneers, and then it wound up being a April Fool's joke or whatever. But anyway, stuff like that. That's all fun stuff. You just have to be abreast of what's going on in pop culture, basically. And then anything that comes out, I think the FDA, anything new. Right now I see a lot of stuff, like, remember that whole charcoal toothpaste trend? That was like a big deal, but then some people were saying it wasn't safe. So like that, I just saw something recently. I subscribe to like alerts on Google. That's also another really good way to keep abreast of like things that are making headlines, about new studies saying that you shouldn't use mouthwash after you brush your teeth. That's not, in my opinion, strong enough to pitch a major market, but a story like that would do very well on a smaller market because, like I say, there's not as much news going on. So they would probably pick that up, and maybe a few other tips that you can offer. That when should you floss your teeth? Like, why you shouldn't brush your teeth right after you eat something with, because it sticks on your teeth or whatever. And that, when you should brush your teeth after you eat a hard candy. We did something recently, tying in, with the seasons. We just did this with one of our dentists, basically summer sweets, what works, what doesn't, or what's better to eat versus than other beach snacks, fireside snacks. Why, s'mores are really bad because it's got the graham cracker and creates bacteria, and then obviously the sticky marshmallow, but chocolate covered fruit might be a better option, things like that. We did stuff like that with you with Halloween. Remember we did the bad breath around the holidays, about foods that create bad breath if you're at a holiday party. So if you're a holiday party and you want to kiss someone under the mistletoe, foods that you would want to avoid, things like that. Just being creative and think about what's in your wheelhouse in terms of what you're obviously credible to speak to, and and offer, quote, the news you can use. It's such a cliche, but it fits, and that kind of thing.
Okay. And then obviously there are ways to reach out to these news people, whether the anchors themselves, the health expert, like you said, does LinkedIn help at all? What's the best way to go ahead and connect with these people?
Everybody's different. I mean, they all have different preferences. I still go by the old school way of emailing them, and I would strongly advise everyone do that first. Another good way would LinkedIn, reaching out, sending them a message. tweeting at them. Reporters specifically tend to be more active on Twitter than any platform at all because it's all news related for the most part, and they're all forced, whether they want to or not, but they're all forced by their news directors and their bosses to have a very strong social media presence. And Instagram's more fluffy, and so Facebook too, and LinkedIn, yeah, but it's more geared towards business. So Twitter's the way to go for news. That would be my advice. To tweet right at them or send them a message on Twitter, whichever. Usually it's better to tweet at them if you're not shy to do so, because the likelihood is that they'll tweet you back and then you'll get their information and move forward that way.
That's cool advice. Twitter is like one of those sites that not many people talk about anymore. Obviously, it was in the news with Donald Trump getting banned and stuff. But the dentists don't really talk about Twitter as a great form of getting patients anymore. It used to be better. I mean, I used to, and not that this is all improv now, but I used to go to, there used to be programs that you'd be able to like quickly search Twitter for people talking about toothaches and issue toothache in Philadelphia, and it allowed you to tweet right to these people. It's very different now than it was. But yeah. I don't think dentists are really using it like that anymore because it is very newsworthy, obviously. So things have changed over the years. But that's a great tip. So use Twitter because they're in news, and that's very highly newsworthy, the Twitter space. So that really makes good. And then you talked a little bit about this before, how you put together the certain languages, the verbiage to use. But how do you recommend someone learns, again, obviously they can hire you, so let's make that clear. Or
no, I understand. But yeah, no, it's all good. You don't have to hire me.
So the other thing was basically how to learn how to pitch somebody a news story or a possible story.
Well, you kind of introduce yourself very quickly in the email, or however if you're tweeting at them, you have to keep it short and sweet. You just share what your story idea is if it's a tweet. Hey, this is happening. This is a really great story. Or I caught your story. They like when you give them a compliment. I mean, maybe it's genuine, maybe it's not. But I saw your story on the flood you covered. It was great coverage. I thought this might be also like something really compelling that your viewers would like. Or, oh, I saw your story. I saw you covered this hospital. Like, this is a really good story for you to cover. And just share with them like some basic bullet points about why you think the story's good, like why their viewers or listeners or readers would want to know about it. It's all about sales, right? It's kind of what it boils down to. So you need to know who your audience is. Who is that person that you're pitching? What do they cover? Like, what did they cover yesterday? Whatever it may be. Like, what do you think is going to be of interest to them? Then you need to know who their audience is because they care only about who they're serving, right? So you need to pitch them to get their attention and then sell them on the fact that they want to do the story, or should want to do the story, I should say, so that their viewers, listeners, or readers will find it compelling. I would say, I think your readers would really like this, or I think this would serve your audience really well, like things like that. So, really knowing who you're pitching and knowing what you're talking about and making it's sales. It really is. I mean, if you come down to it, it is.
Gotcha. Now, is there any recommendations for, obviously there's a target audience for each of the specific things that you may want to pitch. So obviously you've got news on TV, you've got morning news, afternoon news, evening news. I'm assuming there's different audiences for those. Mm-hmm. There's newspapers, which I don't know how great they are now. I know people have really moved to digital formats rather than actual newspapers now. But are there different audiences for different advertising means, basically, or different places to look to pitch, basically?
It depends on the show, right? So if it's a morning show, if you're pitching, like do a live segment maybe in studio, or right now we're doing things on Zoom still, and for the most part in that space, it's mostly moms, right? It's women, moms getting their kids off to school, getting like ready in the morning, like that sort of thing. If it's a health reporter and they're reporting, mostly TV is predominantly female, I have to say. That audience is for the most part in TV ages, say 25 to 55, slightly older depending on the station. Like in Philadelphia, for instance, 6 ABC is famous for skewing a little bit older because they've not really changed a lot overall with their on-air talent. And they have people that have watched for decades and decades and decades. But overall, the rule of thumb, TV is geared predominantly female, and that is the age range, like that, like middle income household, family, mom, etc. Newspapers, it depends on who you're pitching. If it's a business story and you're pitching maybe growth or how you're bouncing back from the pandemic in the medical space, then you're pitching a business writer. The audience is going to be male. You're going to position it as like a business story per se in that way. And then like magazines, if it's a lifestyle magazine, which dentistry can certainly fall into, it doesn't always have to be hardcore health per se, with all of the cosmetic stuff that dentists do and so forth. That's again younger or female. Different shows have different audiences. Sometimes they're more millennial skewed. There's an online national show called Cheddar TV that we do a lot with. That's all millennial skewed. So everything we pitch to them is young, like what young people are doing. Like I say young, I'm 47, so I guess they're not really that young, but they're young for me. And then, so I just want to offend your dentists out there that are millennials. They're not young. And then, it depends on the different shows and who their audience is. You'll know that by doing your due diligence and some research so that you're not just blindly pitching them. The worst thing you can do, and I will say this, is to pitch a show or a writer or whomever and not have a clue what they write about or they report on, because that's going to be such a turnoff to them. They are going to be so insulted and like know that you're just trying to get on TV or just trying to get in the paper, and they're not only are they not going to do your story, they're probably going to blackball you and never work with you again.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
that's interesting. So now that you and I want to obviously do the would you rather and a couple other things, but now that you brought that up, is there anything else that you recommend? That was a big no-no. Make sure you know who you're pitching and what they write about or talk about. Is there any other no-nos that you can recommend, like things not to do?
Not to be obnoxious when you do get them. I mean, like, get my sign. Make sure you get the lobby. Make sure you get they know what they want. You want to show your office nicely if they come to your office, but just accommodate them. Make them get the best story that they can ever get, because then they'll come back and do more stuff with you and be very accommodating. I know you all are busy dentists, busy doctors out there. That's totally understandable. But you have to understand that in the world of the media, I hate to put it as bluntly as this, but you're a dime a dozen, in that way. There's so many of you. Some are better than others, obviously, and I'm sure the ones listening here are the cream of the crop. But nevertheless, in the world of the media, they don't necessarily, quote, need you. You need them, and you need to make sure that you appreciate them. And, I'll always appreciate them so that they return and return and return.
That
whether you have a publicist or not, that's something that you have to do yourself.
And as you told me when I was first starting out, don't tell them that you're not comfortable in front of the camera.
I know. Fake it till you make it. No. Of course not.
Yeah. So that was something you told me right on the bat. Stop saying
that. Don't tell them you're scared. You tell me. I'll give you the pep talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's also something that we do. You asked me about the PR stuff. I mean, whether I represent someone or not, I also offer media coaching, because that's part of it too. You want to do a nice job out of the gate, because then they may not come back. So if you are uncomfortable, you've not done it before, it might behoove you to enlist in a couple hours of that, whether it be with not necessarily me, but anybody like me, that can offer you those tips and things like that.
Hey, I became a great speaker because I took classes. I got coached. You need a coach.
You got great. You were good from the beginning.
Yeah, well, I learned. I took coaching and I took advice, and I listen. I may not agree with all the advice, but I certainly try to listen to the advice. So is there anything else? And again, I'll give you an opportunity in a few minutes to give them your contact information, et cetera. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover for what I would call the meat and potatoes part of the podcast?
No, I think we covered the majority of some of the information. I mean, I like I say, it's going to offer your folks a consultant. We can talk about that later. But I mean, this is the basic stuff. The main thing is know what's trending, know who your audience is, do your due diligence, maybe pick 3 people that you want to start focusing on and build a rapport with them first, and then expand after that. So it's not as daunting and I guess overwhelming, in terms of pitching every reporter under the sun in your media market.
Okay. I mean,
another thing I want to just say too is to be open-minded. So some of the pushback I get initially from clients, like say they have a presence in like the suburb of a big city, but the big city is where all the media is. They were like, I don't want to do that because I'm not in the city. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Everyone in your town's watching that show. You do want to do that. That's who your audience is, or even doing something on a national level. Like, I believe it or not, like someone didn't want to do Good Morning America, but I only want to do Philadelphia. I'm like, who do you think's watching Good Morning America? Yeah, there are people in San Francisco, but there's tons of people from Philly too. So just be open-minded about that, in terms of, not pigeonholing yourself and just focusing on like only your town.
No, and I agree with that. So let's shift gears a little bit. As the viewers and listeners know, I have this section of the podcast where I kind of ask you 10 would you rather questions.
I love it. I'm so excited. This was the best part. I was excited to talk.
So the first one is actually very funny. And I just turn it on. I don't really pick and choose unless they're inappropriate. As I always tell people, these will not be inappropriate at all. So the first one, this is really funny. Would you rather be a local news anchor or a national weather forecaster?
Oh my God, that's a hard one. I think I'd rather be a local newscaster. Do I have to explain why I say that, or
you can if you want to? Sure.
Okay, I think because when I was a news anchor, I was only on the local level, and I really became one with the community, and I got to know my viewers really well, as opposed to being a national. Like, it's obviously vast. I also have no interest in weather, and it changes, and you always get blamed for things that aren't your fault, like because
like John Bolaris in Philadelphia.
Yeah, everybody gets blamed for the storms and because things change. The models are not always accurate.
In a second, they can change.
And I'm also awful at math, so I don't think I would have done well as a meteorologist.
All right, so this is: would you rather fall in love too easily, or never fall in love?
I'd rather fall in love too easily.
Right.
I am single, everybody listening. And I have a podcast called The Race for the Ring, which I neglected to share in the beginning of everything. It's a dating informational podcast. But that said, I'm a believer in true love. So I do want to have true love. So
all right, that's
I
great.
would rather have that.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you rather have a magic button that erases songs you hate or bad movies from being released?
Oh, the magic button. Because there's one in particular that my kids harass me with called Animal. And it gets stuck in my head, and then I'm probably going to be stuck in my head now like all day. Thank you, Mindy, for that. I talk to myself in a third person sometimes. Yeah, I'd rather do that. Bad movies, I just would skip them.
Okay, so this is a funny one. Would you rather live like the Flintstones or the Jetsons?
I don't know. I asked the Flintstones, I guess, only because I liked their little outfits, and they seemed everything was very simple and easy. And if you think about it, the animals did all of the stuff, just like the Jetsons had electronics, so they sort of still had the same amenities for the most part. They weren't doing like the labor, I don't think.
I'd rather live in the future. Jetsons are for me. So,
okay. Well, we are kind of in the future with the Jetsons right now. I think I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, like everything that was in the Jetsons, except for the flying airplane or whatever the car, is pretty much come to fruition.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I think I know the answer to this one. Would you rather live in the heart of a big city or out in the quiet countryside?
Oh my God, in the heart of the big city.
Yeah, of course. I knew that. I didn't have to ask that one.
Yeah, no, God. I grew up in Medford. Medford, New Jersey, which some people refer to as the quote sticks. It's beautiful and it's like pretty lakes and pine trees and stuff, but I found it to be very boring. I like to be in the hustle and the bustle, and I love the energy of a city.
I'm the same way.
Oh, you are?
No, I'm the same way because I grew up in New York. I grew up in the suburbs.
Yeah.
But when I moved to to New Jersey, because I did a residency in New Jersey, I lived in Philadelphia and went across the bridge. I didn't want to live in New Jersey.
God, that's so funny.
So I was definitely I like the hustle and bustle better.
Yeah.
So this is funny. Would you rather have a Texan accent and live in New York, or have a New York accent and live in Texas?
I think I'd rather have a Texan accent and live in New York, because I used to live in Louisiana, and I still whip out the y'all sometimes, like it comes out of me. And I just think it's for a female. I don't know I don't think a Southern accent's so amazing for a guy. Sorry, everybody listening, but the New York accent's a little harsh in my opinion. The Southern one's got a little bit of a ring to it, if I had to choose. But I had to lose my Jersey accent when I was in college. I took vocal lessons to lose it because in news they want you to have the Greater America or Great American, I forget the official term, which is basically the Midwest. There's like no accent, like Illinois, like Wisconsin, like that area. So because New Jersey they say water, like I say water, like things like that.
Philadelphia they say use use.
Oh,
use people.
That's just bad grammar.
Yeah, use.
Yeah.
All right. Would you rather lose your sense of smell or taste?
Probably taste, because then I wouldn't eat. I wouldn't have to work out anymore. How's that? Is that a healthy answer or not?
That's fine.
Okay.
Would you rather be an experimental patient for cryogenics or for human cloning?
Well, I'd say human cloning, but I don't think the rest of the world would agree.
Okay.
1 minute's enough.
Yeah, no. Hey, this is a little weird, and this is really, I think this is more for a man, but would you rather have a mustache that can never be shaved or an extra tongue? Like what?
Ew, neither. I guess the mustache.
Yeah.
I would just wear my mask.
Yeah, that's helped a lot of people. Would you rather have a chance to attend Juilliard or Harvard?
Juilliard. I like to sing and dance and act, so that would be my dream.
All right, I got two more for you. One is on the deck of cards, but I ask everybody. This is the last one on this deck. Would you rather play Yahtzee or Scrabble?
Scrabble.
Okay. And then the one that I ask everybody, and it's on the deck, I'm going to take it out. Would you rather not be able to use search engines again or not be able to use your apps on your phone again?
Oh, my God. I guess the apps on my phone. I rely so heavily on the search engine for my job.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I can never live without Google. I Google everything.
I do too.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that little segment. I think that's a fun
part. Yeah, it was so fun. I love it.
That's good.
So fun.
So Mindie, why don't you tell people how they can reach out to you? You're giving your contact information. I know you had an offer that you wanted to offer, like an offer you wanted to throw out to the listeners. So why don't you talk about that?
Yep. So for the first 10 people that email me from the Raving Patients Podcast, and I'm going to give you the email address in a second, I would like to offer you a 20-minute complimentary consultation with me. Not so much for me to solicit your business, but to offer you tips and news you can use and things like that to help propel yourself in the media, in your own media markets. So it's literally going to be first come, first serve. The first 10 I receive, your wish is granted. It's my email address. Forgive me, everybody listening. It's rather long. Perhaps Dr. Tao can put it in the show notes too. But it's M as in Mindi, Barnett, BARNETT at MBAND associatespr.com.
Okay, and that's the way. So they should email you. The first 10 people.
Yeah,
will
the first
get
10.
a 20-minute
just
consult.
Email me, introduce yourself, and then
just tell them you heard about us on the podcast.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Okay. Definitely in the subject line, put Raving Patients Podcast. That way I open up quickly.
So now you guys know what to do if you want to chat with Mindie. Mindie, what markets? I know you mentioned a couple of them. So there's listeners all over the country here listening. Yeah. What markets do you feel you have a very good connection in? I know you mentioned some of them.
I mean, all of them, to be honest. But my right now, I work a ton with LA, San Diego, Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, Philly, New York, Detroit. Trying to think where else my clients have a presence. I think that's the main ones.
Okay. So if you're in one of those cities,
Washington D.C. too.
So if you're in one of those cities and you are thinking about hiring a PR person or have thought about hiring a PR person but never knew who to call, I don't do this in a lot of my podcasts, but I highly, highly, highly recommend you reach out to Mindie because she was awesome when I used her.
You.
And the only reason I didn't use her anymore was because my career switched. I was only in the office a couple days a week, and I had so many other things I was doing. She even if you remember, you got a piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the business I started. So she's been very good, and I highly recommend you. If you want to learn more about what she can do, definitely reach out to her.
Thank you. That's sweet. I appreciate that.
This was great. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with the viewers and the listeners.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Tao. It's so fun. We should catch up in person sometime in Philly, too.
Well, I'm there every week, so we can definitely find a time to do that. But if you want to reach out to Mindie, you have her information, please do. If you like this episode, share it with your colleagues or you know someone in one of the other towns we talked about who is looking to get on some television, share the podcast with them so they have Mindy's information. But if you like the episode, share it, review us, like us. I don't do any promotion on this podcast. It's all the listeners who are really good at getting the information out there. Remember, the episodes come out Friday at 1 p.m. As I was recording this, it's on a Friday actually, and one of the newest episodes popped up on my phone. So, but you only know that if you subscribed. But thank you so much, Mindy, again. I really appreciate it. And for those that are listening and watching, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, we'll talk to you soon.